What happened to Soviet hikers who died in the northern Ural Mountains between February 1st and 2nd of 1959? Today, the Jackalopes will look at what we know about the Dyatlov Pass incident.
This episode of Jackalopes Explore is brought to you by Sheridan Stationery Books and Gifts, located at 535 North Main Street in Sheridan. Stop by today to peruse books, stationery, gifts, sports cards, and more. Or visit us at SheridanStationeryBooks.com.
I'm Floyd Whiting.
I'm Aaron Linden.
I'm Steve Sisson.
I'm Emmy Whiting.
And we are your Jackalopes. We're going to take a deep dive into the Jackalope hole to find out the context to many conspiracy theories and issues affecting our world today. Now, diaries and cameras found at their last campsite actually made it possible to track this group and the route up to the day preceding what has been named the Dyatlov incident. Each member of the group was actually an experienced grade 2 hiker with ski tour experience, and they would be receiving their grade 3 certification upon their return. And one reason why I tell you this is grade 2 hiking, they knew what they were doing and they knew where they were going. So what happened to these folks? Let's dive right into the Jackalope hole. Aaron, what happened to these people?
Oh man, this is one of my favorite stories, and I knew about it, but in researching it, it's even better than what I had anticipated. Mm-hmm. So this group heads out. And basically, exactly what you said. They were trying to find a different way through this pass, and in doing so, they would be upgraded from their level 2 to level 3. So it was kind of a big deal. They were going, as you said, they were very experienced. So this group, it was from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, and it was led by Igor Dyatlov, right? So they go and they get their permitting for this. So they take off by train, to get to their base camp, essentially, area where they're going to take off from. And between February 1st and February 2nd, something happened. And that's been just the realm of conspiracy and controversy since 1959, because nobody knew what happened to these people. So they head up, and somewhere in February 1st to 2nd, they're assuming it was overnight, their tents were cut from the inside so that they could escape. There were 8 men and 2 women on this venture. There was actually supposed to be one other person in the group, but they had to turn back because of health issues. That was divine intervention.
That was one of the women, right?
That was one of the women, okay. Yes. Yep, actually turned back. It just gets weird, though, because so they cut their way out of their tents, leaving behind almost all of their clothing and their shoes. Again, with the shoes, like we covered with the hunters last week, which is very weird. So about 26 days later, they hadn't been heard from. So they sent out a search party, a rescue party. And it took them some time before they actually found 6 of them that they claimed died from hypothermia. 3 died from physical trauma. 1 had major skull damage, 2 had severe chest damage, and another had a small crack in their skull. But there was no signs of struggle. There was no signs of wild animal attack. There wasn't anything. But they found 5 of them, I think, originally, and it took them another 2 months to find the other 4. So the first 4 were about 1,600 feet downslope near the edge of a forest. There were 2 of them there that had started to build a small fire, and they actually had burns on their hands. And they weren't sure if it was from the fire or what it was from. But the tree that they were under was a big Siberian pine, and all the branches for up to 5 meters up were broken off. So they couldn't tell if they were trying to go up the tree to evade something, or if they were trying to climb the tree to get, bearings on where they were, because supposedly this happened overnight. But so they're 1,600 feet downslope near the edge of the forest. That's where they find 2 of them. But between that pine tree and the camp there were 4 more bodies that they discovered under anywhere from 3 to 6 feet of snow. They were at distances of 300, 480, and 630 meters from the tree. So they don't know if they were going to the tree or if they were actually heading back to try and grab more provisions. But I mean, we're talking 1,600 feet. It's not that far.
No.
I mean, in a blizzard, sure. Yeah, absolutely. If it's 30 below and it's dark.
But you can still see the fire, right? There was a fire.
A small fire. So 1,600 feet, but it took 2 months before they discovered the other bodies. They were 246 feet further into the forest at the bottom of a ravine, 13 feet down under snow, but they were in a running creek. Now, of those people that they found there, 2 of them were missing their eyes. One woman was missing her tongue and an eyebrow. And one of them had trace amounts of radiation.
So when you say missing an eyebrow, does that mean the hair or does that mean like the flap of skin attached to the eyebrow?
Just no eyebrow. That's all it said. The one that had the slight amount of radiation, they described as having orange skin and gray hair by the time they found him.
Interesting. So, Emmy, you're pretty good at, you know this one pretty well. We go on a hiking trip. There's 9 of us. We get up to the last camp, as it's come to be known. Everyone settles in for the night. Something causes them to cut their way out of this tent, and everyone basically scatters. It appears, from what Aaron describes, as we just can't find our way back, or they're trying to avoid or evade something.
I mean, that's the big mystery. What happened to these people? Because I think a lot of people will just say, well, it was hypothermia, because hypothermia can make you do weird things.
Yes, it can.
Can make your skin feel like it's on fire. So, I mean, yeah, that explains the clothes, but at the same time, there's weird things about the clothes, too. Whereas I was reading on this article I was on, that one person's foot was wrapped in a piece of another person's pants. Like,
wow.
You know, maybe they were injured somehow, or, you know, maybe that's why they stopped for the night right at that moment. And then another person, let's see here, was found wearing another person's hat and coat. Like, they're all mixed up, and it's very odd, you know? And then also there was a lot of clothing items that had cuts in them too. And even if you're going into hypothermia, I mean, I would just assume you'd just rip off your coat and everything. Why would you risk cutting yourself too? But, you know, maybe in a panic you would. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very interesting.
So let's keep in mind that this is 1959. This is the Cold War is well in operation, I guess you could say. The Soviet Army is the one who investigated this disappearance. And what I do know is when the first medical examiner started to try and basically say, hey, look, this is weird, the Soviet military had him dismissed. They brought in another medical examiner who would write what the Soviet military told them to write. So it's very confusing, and it's very hard to get a straight what happened, how did we find them type of answer. You know, behind the Iron Curtain, this mystery may never really be discovered, because there may not be documents, you know, talking about what was really found or what they really thought happened.
Right.
Is there any kind of explanation, and I'll hand this to either one of you, as to why there was radiation involved in one body? The tongue was missing. The eyes were missing. Those I can kind of see. Decomposition takes the soft parts first, right?
Well, but when you think about the temperatures, you know, that is supposed to preserve everything. If you're frozen.
there's still a ton of bodies on Mount Everest
Exactly.
that they can't bring down, and they're in
fully formed.
Fully formed, still clothed. I mean, their clothes are
decomposition is it would be very unlikely, I feel.
See, that's just really weird.
And I mean, we're talking about a period of 2 months, of them finding the first bodies to finding the ones in the ravine that are missing eyes, missing tongues, whatever. So it's not a crazy amount of time. It's not like, it's in the Everglades where it's hot and muggy and whatever. Yeah, it's cold.
Yeah.
It's a very cold environment. They were up there. It was 20 below.
Yeah. And even if it was
evenings.
critters, I mean, why would they just take those parts?
Yeah.
And leave the rest of the body intact. Because, you could eat a cheek.
Right. Well,
Why would you take the tongue
Opportunists.
over the cheek that's right there, So.
That's very true. And an animal isn't going to get specific. Oh, I prefer the tongue.
I enjoy the eyeballs.
If you were to test for radiation on a dead body, one of the first locations would be the tongue because it's soft. And it would probably, I would think, absorb radiation quickly. And so that would give you a gauge of how much radiation that
Sisson
body
knows
had
about
taken.
radiation.
Yeah.
You do, actually.
Yeah, I deal with it. Not that kind of radiation, but
Yeah. So all of these bodies in different states of decomposition, all of these bodies with a little something weird. One thing, the injuries that you listed off, the trauma that was suffered by these bodies. If I was a medical examiner, and I'm not a doctor, but in my very, very limited, first aid training, I would say that these sound like avalanche injuries. Or falls. We got damage to the chest. We've got damage to a head. We got a cracked skull. That's the first place my mind would go. I was talking with Sisson this morning, and if it's dark, we're all in a tent, kind of huddled in there together. When you hear an avalanche, whether it's even on the other ridge or the ridge next to you, you don't know that. So I would probably tell everybody, get out, go to a different spot, we'll gather up in a moment, like every man for themselves kind of deal. Just make sure that you're not covered in snow. I mean, is that a possibility? Is that something that was discussed?
What's interesting is, they theorize on a lot of stuff, from katabic type winds, so downslope winds that can come in with like gale force, hurricane force winds. That area is not known for that. So that one's kind of out. Another one was the Mansai tribe. So they're nomadic reindeer herders that are very territorial. But in the autopsies, it said that the damage, fractured skulls and chest damage, was consistent with somebody that was hit by a vehicle.
My God.
I mean, like, more force than human-on-human contact. Not to mention, there was no sign of any kind of a struggle, whether it was, a Yeti or whatever. I mean, there just wasn't. In fact, it gets kind of really weird in the fact that not only were there some levels of radiation, but this force that they're talking about, what could cause that, right? So avalanche. Everybody's like, oh, it was an avalanche. Well, avalanches occur at a minimum of like a 30-degree slope. Where these guys were camped was between 23 and 25. There have been 100 other expeditions that have gone through this area since 1959, and not any one of them has ever reported any kind of avalanche activity. So they want to say it was avalanche. Everything points to avalanche. However, none of it really points to avalanche because of where they were, the time of year that they were there, the amount of snow that had occurred prior to and during. A standard avalanche doesn't really apply. It's interesting, though, because there's just some weird stuff in here. And so I'll get into some of the weird conspiracy stuff. So, as you had mentioned, they went up, write a report, bring it back to me. Nope, we don't like that. Send another guy. We'll take that one. But then they subsequently put it into a secret archive where nobody could touch it.
Now, why would they do that?
Why would they do that?
Why would they do that if this was just another hiking accident?
Right. And if you have your patsy writing the report, why are you secretly archiving it somewhere. It says what you want it to say,
And
just to make it disappear.
on my research, I found the Soviet investigators listed the cause of death as compelling natural force.
Yes.
Compelling natural force.
That was the last definitive explanation.
Yep, and then they
compelling
closed it.
natural force.
Yep.
Interestingly, though,
That's how do you tell somebody that, oh, I've got bad news. Your sister died from a compelling natural force.
isn't like death just a compelling natural force anyway?
Right.
Like, I mean,
Like, leave it as vague as possible for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if this was just another accident with natural decomposition, why would you go to these lengths?
right. So interestingly, on April 12th, 2018, I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Zolotarevi's remains were exhumed, and he was one of the people that was on this expedition. Experts stated that his injuries were, again, that of a person being hit by a car. However, when they did a DNA analysis of him, his DNA did not match any living relative. And it's been theorized that not only was his name not on record as being buried at this cemetery, but there was some theory around that actually in World War II, he had died in battle and someone else picked up his name that was on this excavation, or this expedition, rather.
Interesting.
So
is
they
very
dig him up.
That's crazy.
His name's not on the burial reports, and his DNA doesn't match any living relative. So who was this guy and what was he doing there?
Wow, I didn't know that.
Right.
I'd never seen that before.
Oh, I went deep.
Yeah, that's amazing. Though.
So it's just weird that, again, just doesn't match names, doesn't match DNA, nothing.
And it's one more level of weird
Absolutely.
On top of weird.
on top of weird.
Weird on top of weird.
So there was a Swiss research computer model that actually went into the avalanche theory.
Okay.
And they came out and they said that the model suggested that it could possibly have been an avalanche. It's not really hard
It's not
evidence, is it?
definitive.
Yeah,
No.
I wouldn't say it's definitive
No.
at all.
Yeah.
But these guys, they're Swiss and they have avalanches. So you kind of got to wonder what's really going on there. At the time, though, when they went up to investigate, so we're talking 26 days later after they were supposed to have been back, there were no signs of an avalanche at that time. Like I said, another 100 expeditions have been through there, no avalanches. This is what's really weird. The tents that had snow on them were collapsed from the side. Well, you would think if it was an avalanche, it would have been from the upward slope coming down. It wasn't. It was when they got there and they took pictures, they were all collapsed in from the side. Because the theory was, maybe if it came down the mountain and they had their door facing that way, maybe away from the upward wind or whatever, they couldn't get out, so they had to cut their way out.
Right.
But that's not what the photo suggested. It was from the side, not from the downhill.
I actually have a photo here,
Ooh.
so you guys can see it.
We can put the photo up in post.
Yeah.
That's
We should do
interesting.
that. So the question becomes, well, was it an avalanche? And by the time they got there, the wind had just swept it a different way.
Right. Right.
Who knows? Because, you're 26 days later and snow does funny things.
We live here in Wyoming, and you know that a 10-foot snowdrift can show up overnight.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing is all of the footprints leading away from the tents down to the tree line and subsequently down into the ravine were at a normal walking gait, distance-wise.
So not a run.
Not a run, if I'm running away from a Yeti in the snow, right? There's going to be long strides and maybe a couple of falls.
What we
and
call panic footprints.
Put your hands in the snow and pause and look back.
Yeah.
None of that. Just walk. Just a standard walk down there, which is, again, bizarre.
Yeah, if there's an avalanche, I'd be running.
You'd be running.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So other theories were, at the time, they were doing military parachute mine exercises. in the Ural Mountains, where they'd fly over and drop mines with parachutes. They'd land and boom, blow up. So did they hear that in the middle of the night and they got scared, thought it was an avalanche, maybe it was going to cause an avalanche and bolted? Why would they cut their way out of their tent if that were the case? As much as I would like this to be like a botched alien abduction because a Yeti came and it just all went bad.
And they had to leave him there.
The aliens were like, well, I don't want to take the Yeti too.
Abort, abort.
And they get so upset when you don't take it.
Yeah,
So,
we know how they are.
Yeah.
We're just
They're
leaving.
like, why can't I go? I don't have shoes on. Yeah.
I don't have shoes on.
She's wearing someone's pants.
Yeah. Somebody else's pants. But so as much as I would love for this to be one of those like crazy, the reindeer guys showed up, the aliens came to abduct them while the Yeti's tearing into some tents, I really looked into slab avalanches. Mm-hmm. And if you think about this, slab avalanche makes a ton of sense because they're on a 23-degree slope. Not enough for an actual like full-blown good old-fashioned avalanche, but they dig in to make this flat spot here. So they're actually there's, who knows, 5 feet snow over there, whatever.
Creates like a wind block.
Creates a wind block. But also what ends up happening, if you've been around snow and ice, is the lower layers of snow compress through heating and cooling and melt into ice. Right? So you've got different layers of ice and then subsequently softer snow on top of it. If further up there's wind that goes through or whatever it is, or them digging, that next layer under the snow of ice could crack away. And it could take 12 hours before that decides to move. Well, if that moves, the weight of that ice and snow coming down onto that tent would probably be pretty damn consistent with a car wreck.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're
it's
saying.
like concrete moving. And even if it's moving at 20 miles an hour, not that fast, but fast enough to, if you're laying in a tent and it comes down on your chest, head, whatever, and crushes you essentially, but you're able to kind of wiggle free out of the tent, cut that sucker open, and take off.
Or get your buddy. You grab your buddy because he's injured. He just got injured from this thing. And then you all bolt because you think, well, he's the unlucky one that got it right now. Mm-hmm. But what happens when the rest of this slab comes down on top of
And that's
us?
the thing. That's why we get the hell out of here. We go to the tree line, we build a fire, and try and figure this out. Okay, well, now it's been a couple hours. Nothing else is moving. Let's head back that way. Well, by now, you're so hypothermic that one of you drops, 200 meters. Mm-hmm. Another one drops 480. Another one drops 600. The only thing I cannot figure out is why did those 4 people end up 200 and some feet further in, 13 feet down in a creek?
And see, my only logical explanation for that would be that when we got out of the tent, we maybe separated into 2 separate groups in a panic. Mm-hmm. And then one of those groups couldn't find their way back.
Split up gang.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Where maybe just, maybe there was a storm with it and you just can't get through that blizzard. But again, to me, that doesn't seem like a death event, where all 9 are lost. A few, the 4 that wandered off, maybe. Why didn't the other individuals who built the fire
And seemed capable.
survive?
Yeah.
What came along that did this to them? I mean, obviously they froze to death, but with the tents and everything being right there, with all the gear right there, with a fire right here, it makes no sense that all 9 souls were lost in this event. Like I said, maybe the 4 that went off by themselves, sure, they couldn't make it back. What led to us suddenly losing our minds and essentially freezing to death?
Well, that, I'm glad you asked, could be due to infrasound induced panic. So again, and Sisson probably knows more about this than any of us, but low level frequency or whatever that ends up just basically like kind of driving you nuts.
Yeah, well, we know that there are military weapons like that where it's just sound, but it messes with your mind and makes you basically go insane.
Right.
Tell me about this infrasound.
That's what it is. Yeah, I mean, it's just a certain frequencies at a certain amplitude. It'll mess with you, and you can't handle it. Basically, is what it comes down to.
Kind of just scrambles your brain.
Yeah.
Now, the indigenous people of this area, they have often talked about events, lights, strange things, and they call this the Devil's Pass, right? Like this was a spot that you're not supposed to go, according to the indigenous folk around there. So could it be something strange like that? The wind blowing through peaks and whatever?
And think about what we talked about last week with like electromagnetic stuff where things just happen in certain places. I mean, that could be one of those places too.
It really could.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's remote. It's middle of nowhere, Russia, middle of nowhere mountains, middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so, those places tend to have those kinds of stories, whether it's the Wendigo or a Yeti or strange lights in the sky.
Skinwalkers.
Right. And all of that comes from somewhere. Now, some of it's just folklore, sure. But as we've learned in the recent few weeks here, I mean, there's congressional hearings on UFOs. So could it have been some sort of an event like that made them scared, nervous, whatever, to run away from their base camp, essentially? Wow. I don't know. But just the weird thing is the radiation. And it's on one person, not on the entire group.
That's odd. Yeah.
That becomes, was it Russian military testing out their mines, their radiation weapons, their infra low energy, whatever, vibrations? Were they just the unfortunate group that they're like, hey, they're up there, we could test this stuff, and see what happens? Or could it have been something way more nefarious, like the reindeer herders going, hey, you don't belong here, and maybe they set off an avalanche? I don't know for certain, but based on what I know about avalanches, the speed and weight of what the snow and ice are, being consistent with basically being hit by a vehicle, where else would that have come from?
Yeah. That trauma caused to the body. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
And there was no soft tissue damage with this. It was all internal. So it was all chest, fractured skulls, things like that.
No major lacerations.
Nothing. Right. No animal attacks. No club to the head.
And see,
nothing.
That's why I'm like, the eyeballs and the tongue thing are still so weird to me.
That's weird. The orange skin.
Yes, because I'm like, if it's critters, they would have done more damage. And
they would have eaten.
There was no damage on their skin from animals.
And from what I understand, there's not a lot of critters up there. I mean, there's the reindeer, and there's some predatory animals, but not. They don't hang out up there.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a little too nasty.
It's cold. Yeah.
Steve.
Some thoughts. Why would they cover it up? Well, it's the Soviet Union. They cover everything up.
No, yeah, they cover up taking a tissue out of it.
I mean, just the fact that you had some climbers that got into a situation, well, Soviets don't do that. We're better than that. It could just be that. The initial investigation was certainly, I wouldn't say it was botched, but it had issues, which have, of course, created all kinds of openings and holes for alternate theories to come in. I think the radiation can be explained by gas lamps. There were gas lamps, thorium in gas lamps, the little bags.
Yeah,
There's small amounts of radiation in those.
Wow.
And
I didn't know
the fact that not every climber had radiation present would explain that. Like they had the lamp with that one person or closest to that person.
Interesting.
I think that would explain that. It's a possible explanation anyway.
Right.
Yeah. I think what it's kind of hard because we look for the explanation, and I don't think there is an explanation here.
Series of events.
Yeah, I think it was most disasters are a combination of things that all line up in just the wrong way to make things go really wrong. And I think Aaron kind of hit on it. I don't think it was like an avalanche per se, but a localized slide of snow, because they did dig into the slope and stuff above it with a snowstorm and all that, wind and all that could build snow up there, cause it to break loose. When you're in a tent at night in a snowstorm, you're not going to know that that's not a big avalanche. You can't tell the difference. I think their experience probably worked against them in some ways, because if they had probably stayed in the tent, they probably would have survived. But in that situation, you're going to be like, we're going to get entombed in here.
Yeah.
So cut your way
want
out.
to get out.
And it may not have been panic, but maybe with a sense of urgency that they would leave and not take the time to get dressed and all that stuff. Maybe not running out, but still leaving with a sense of urgency, like right now, just get out of there. That could explain why there's no running, but why they would not be fully clothed. I think what probably could have happened is they all group and start a fire, but some of them are less clothed than others. Others have, more clothing on. I think the ones that were least clothed would hang around the fire to stay warm, while others would try to maybe work a way back to the camp. And I think at some point, some of them probably died before others, and the ones that were dead, their clothing got removed and placed on the ones that were still alive. I don't know why it would take them so long to get back to the camp. That's kind of an odd thing.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you go back to that tent?
Yeah. Of course, we don't know the time frame this all happened in, because we didn't even start the search until like a month later. Yeah. And some of them weren't found until much after that. The decomposition was in the ones that were found the latest. So, that would... the amount of decomposition is kind of weird. Like you said, why not other pieces? Why just the eyes and the tongue? That's kind of strange. Yeah. But those were the ones that were found in the creek area. And if there's a creek, things are thawing. It's not Mount Everest where things are going to stay frozen forever. So, some decomposition in that amount of time is probably not unreasonable. The skin color, could just be from exposure to the sun and all that. I think you would have to rule out all of those possibilities before you would say for sure that it had to be something, more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, obviously there's going to be stuff that you can't explain because of, the amount of time that passed, the amount of time that's passed now. And it was, it was like the 90s, I think, before a lot of this stuff got, uncovered.
Oh, before the story even got out. Yeah.
The Soviet Union was gone by the time we were even able to read most of this stuff. So, that trail was already very cold by then. So, a lot of stuff, like, the stuff that initiated the events, I think, is going to always be a mystery. What exactly happened there? But some of these people were buried under, a significant amount of snow. There could have been another slide afterwards. It may not have been the only one, and maybe that's why they couldn't make it back to the camp. I think there's other possibilities, but they're all just questions as well.
And you guys know how it is. You get up there sometimes in the forest, and even when you start walking in, you think to yourself, well, I know this trail. And then it snows on you. And you turn around and realize the entire landscape looks completely different.
I have experienced that, yeah.
Have I.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. Like just a slight turn, the snow changes everything.
Absolutely everything. And landmarks that you're very familiar with suddenly become very odd looking. And you don't realize it's the same landmark.
And if you add bad weather and darkness into that compounds that.
Again, the perfect storm of circumstances to lead to a horrible event. And again, the communist Soviet government at the time is more concerned with PR than investigations. So I don't care what you find, tie it in a bow, close this up, don't bother looking any farther into it. It's 9 people. Sorry, but if you're, an empire like that who doesn't really care about
none of them were high-ranking government related at all. So
no reason to go any farther than get a medical examiner who's going to say what we want, call it good. So I could see that happening as well. Whereas if this happened in the United States, I like to think that our officials would be like, I want to know what happened to those poor folks. So. But you never know. So what happened to the Soviet hikers who died on the northern side of the Ural Mountains? I don't know if we will ever know that.
I don't know that we will ever know that. From what I learned in all of this, because like I said, I was familiar with the story, but some of these more intricate details really kind of piqued my interest. Mostly, though, is... who was the dude that was buried there?
That's really interesting.
That's the one out of all of the crazy ass mysteries and conspiracies around this. Yeah. That's the one that I'm like, well, wait a minute. Well, I didn't know about that.
All like, oh no, there's someone here that's not supposed to be here.
Now that poses another question, though. World War II, records were lost. People died. Millions and millions of people died in Russia. So how many people did this?
Changed an
That
identity.
would be, I mean, interesting, because you wouldn't know. I moved to another part of Russia. I say this is who I am. And what's the record search going to be like over there after a world war? No electronic record keeping in any way. You're taking people on their word. Oh, well, this is obviously, whatever. Yeah. This is obviously Aaron Linden.
Yeah, he knows all the stories. He knows,
He knows everything about Mr. Linden's life. I've got no way to double check that, especially Soviet Russia during that time. How many people decided I am going to be someone else?
It would be a great opportunity to do that because, just the massive record keeping, there's going to be holes and you can slip through it so easily.
And Russia back then, you could literally just walk into a city and say, I'm a farm boy from this region. We had a small farm. No one's going to double check that.
No.
Nobody can. You could make up anything you wanted. So,
and especially at that time, it's like, okay, you're a bad dude and you're going to spend life in a gulag, or I can be Bill Smith.
You're going to, now you're changing your name.
Used to be so easy.
Yeah, it used to be so easy.
A lot of people were saying, well, but DNA technology back in the day. Well, this was 2018. I mean, this isn't that long ago that they actually tested the DNA. So I'm like, nope, that's out the window.
Here's the thing when it comes to people questioning DNA technology. We use it in a court of law.
Yeah.
If we're using it in a court of law to sentence men and women to death, it's been proven. At least to us.
It's accurate enough where you could make that kind of determination.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not like DNA testing from 1962.
Right.
Well, you take biology 101 in college, and that is one of the first things that you learn about. And the experiments that you do, and they're very small experiments with a strawberry, and you can prove the DNA in a strawberry against DNA in that strawberry. And it's literally like lining up lines. And if they don't line up, it's not the same strawberry. It's that simple, where it's only a comparison. And I'm sure everyone out there has actually seen like a code DNA on and in the gel is what it's in. And you just line that up. It's better than a fingerprint. So, anyone who wants to poo-poo DNA testing, in my opinion, probably hasn't had much experience with it. It's pretty definitive.
Yeah, it's far more likely that someone had swapped identities than the DNA was
Absolutely.
messed up.
Yeah. Especially at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, and who would think, that you're ever going to discover that I'm not this individual?
Well, it wasn't until 2018 that they...
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That it even came up. And so, I mean, that is probably a much more intriguing, mystery.
I would love to know who this man was. Because what if he was just like some weirdo serial killer?
Her mind always goes to serial killers.
You know what, though?
Everyone with them finds out, and then it turns into like this whole weird shit,
Yeah, where he sets off the avalanche to kill everybody, and then he can't get back out.
Make a good movie.
It would make a great movie.
Oh yeah, there is. Speaking of movies, because I have to wrap this movie because it's so good. I can't remember if it's Devil's Pass or Diablo's Pass, but
I think it's called Devil's Pass.
it is amazing. It's about this incident, but not like this incident.
It's like the alternative.
Yes.
Yeah, inspired by
And it's
actual
like-
events.
Like
All
Once
about-
Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, it's all about Russian experiments. There's time traveling. There's all this.
Oh, it's good, buddy.
It's so good.
It's one of those movies that you don't even think about, and you're like flipping through, and you're like, we'll give this a shot. And then you walk away from it going, my God, that was a gem.
It was so
That's a find.
Yes.
It's a find.
Wow.
Devil's Pass. If you get a shot,
Yeah.
check it out. You learn all about the actual incident. And then, of course, they go into speculation, and good storytelling.
Ooh.
But
I'm going to
this,
check that out.
Oh,
this
it's
particular
so good.
event has always intrigued me because of the odd findings, because of the government covering everything up. But now that we know what we know about the Russian government, this is not odd for the Soviets to do. Like I said, I don't care what you say. Just tell me it was something quite usual. Tie it up in a bow. We'll all move on. And I think that's what happened. What these people deserved an investigation. These people deserved much more than what they
And
got.
their families.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
because think about the families in this. Of course, we're over here like, what happened? We're speculating for fun. But that was like their family member, their loved one.
Yes.
And they're like, seriously, what happened?
Yeah.
I'd like to know.
No closure
Yeah.
whatsoever.
No closure.
An absolute mystery
Yeah.
of, this terror and fear in the dark on a mountain in the middle of the night. And your loved one went through that. Whatever happened. So, yeah, I think they deserved much more than what they got, because now all we can do is speculate. All we can do is look at the conspiracy theories and assume. And, and obviously we'll probably never, ever know what happened.
Yeah, I think it's the Titanic of climbing incidents.
It really is.
The story will endure forever, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could have been something very simple, a shelf. What are those called? A shelf avalanche, slab avalanche that threw everything off course. And like you said, one perfect storm of bad circumstances turns into a conspiracy theory for all of time.
What do they call that when it's like the easiest option is typically
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor.
Yeah.
But it's really true. I mean, if you had a professional up there who didn't just appease a government, I'm pretty sure they could have figured out what happened to this people.
There were opportunities missed right there at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even though it had already been almost a month since whatever happened, the trail would never be warmer than it was at that point. And there were definitely some things that got overlooked or intentionally discarded.
Yeah.
And if you go up there, and this isn't a dig on our privates anywhere, but you go up there with a bunch of privates to investigate this thing, and they start seeing orange-colored bodies. They're coming back with some stories of their own.
Yeah.
You should have seen what we found up there. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but she was orange.
Right.
And conspiracy theories abound after that.
Mm-hmm. And that happens even in the Titanic. If you're getting paid to tell a story, you're going to make it a good one.
Absolutely.
So you might embellish just a little bit, and then that gets embellished a little bit more, and then time goes by.
Right, like a game of telephone. Yeah.
So, I think we've kind of walked through this one. Aaron, do you have anything else that...
No, I was just hoping for something more fantastical.
I know, right? Like,
I really was. Because I went into it like, oh man, I'm going to dig into this and I'm going to find the missing link.
See,
I'm finding it. But
now that I know about that guy, I'm all about my serial killers.
That is probably the most interesting thing to come out of this. And who knows what kind of clues there may be around that. But
right.
I think there's a good chance.
I would love to look into it more.
Yeah, somebody swapped identities after the war. That's a good chance. Yeah.
That one is a jackalope hole, because how do you even follow that?
Yeah.
Right.
How do you
I don't
follow
know that
who
you
this
could.
guy was before?
Yeah.
The records that were destroyed during the war. I mean, think about it. Stalingrad was essentially destroyed. Any evidence of existence for 90% of those people in that city was probably wiped out.
Yeah.
Burned.
That trail was gone long ago.
And
unless they've somehow subsequently found a DNA match for him, and that's public record somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But, you'd have to have a DNA record of someone from back in that time, which would be pretty hard to find. So.
And imagine to sit there and try to compare that. That's too much.
I remember all they were able to do was that the facial reconstruction matched pictures of this person after the war.
Yes.
But that doesn't tell you anything.
No.
Because this was all after the war that supposedly this would have happened.
And and behind the Iron Curtain, where they're not telling you anything anyway. And who knows how those records were kept, or if anyone even bothered. Like now that we know what we do know about the Soviets and the way that some of their bureaucracy was operated, there was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of just sidestepping, do whatever's easiest. I mean, it fell for a reason, and corruption and people just not doing their jobs is a big reason why it fell. So who knows?
So other than that, I wish that it was a more fantastic story, but I think it was, as Steve said, unfortunate events. But I'm gonna see what I can find on this guy.
Yeah. See if anyone started an investigation just out of curiosity or on the side. It'd be interesting to find out who he really was. It'd be interesting to know, where did the real guy go?
Right.
Yeah.
Where's the real man? If he's not matching
Probably
up.
in Argentina with Osama bin Laden and Elvis. And,
Yeah.
you know,
But, to replace somebody, they would have had to have gone somewhere. So,
Yeah, something happened to person A before person B could come in and take their place.
and obviously, person B did not go and visit the family very often.
Yeah.
Or this thing was done by a tabloid and the whole DNA story is made up.
Telling ya. Serial killer.
Always goes there. All right. Anybody else got anything?
Nope.
Watch Devil's Pass.
All right. So we may never know what happened to these hikers. And more than likely, it was just a series of unfortunate events that led to the death of 9 hikers. And due to what was found, started these conspiracies. So, again, it is a mystery that will never be solved. Or is there even really a mystery? Except, who is person B? And where is person A? That's our next one. No, we're never going to be able to find it.
I'll dig and see what I can find.
See what?
The episode's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Next week, if you're listening, next week, Aaron will bring that to the table and see
Yes.
just exactly if there's anything that could be found. I really don't think you're going to be able to find anything, my friend.
No,
but
it'll be a little work, but that's okay.
this will be fun. All right, you've been listening to Jackalopes Explore.